But we're uncovering pretty incredible stuff. And so what's happened just this month is the Declaration of Canestraro, which it's a bombshell. Basically, today, like what we can say today is if the 9/11 truth movement was looking for an inside job, here it is.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the inside job. It's right there. But what I wanted to finish up on this point with, just to give you a little bit of a broader picture of 9/11 truth and this whole topic, this all hinges on a couple of figures who we'll get into, and there's actually figures surrounding them, which we'll get into as well. But this all hinges on two individuals called Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi.
What is up, everybody? My name is Kyle Matovcik. I am the host of the In Liberty and Health podcast, where we talk all things liberty, health, and wellness, and beyond. My hope is to encourage and spread the message of liberty and physical and mental well-being. I hope you enjoy all the topics we talk about with our guests. We're on all major streaming platforms, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Man, I'm doing as good as anyone can do getting buried by his 13-year-old son on leg day.
I'm not going to apologize for not being on this podcast because I got to go see Metallica. So if that's a problem, kiss my ass. Okay? All right.
All right, everybody. This is In Liberty and Health. Returning to the show, I have Adam Fitzgerald, and then his first time on, Mr. Sean Russell. Both of people I follow on Twitter and enjoy talking to. So how you guys doing today?
Hey, Kyle, doing great. Thanks for having me.
Good, of course.
Well, once again, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so I was joking before the show that we're quote unquote disinformation disrespecters because we're kind of like, I don't even want to necessarily say in the middle, but we want to know the truth. We want to know if, the mainstream media is telling the truth, with the majority of the time they're not, or if maybe a little bit of the kook narrative is the truth, which we know it's usually not, or, kind of see what's going on out there. Because as Adam and I talked about last time, there's so much poison pilling that goes on in any one individual topic that whenever you disagree with something or like you disagree with either narrative, then both the extremes on the sides are going to say, well, you're just showing for this side, you're just showing for the other side. So when I talk about the treatment, which I'm sure you guys can infer what I'm referring to here, when I say, well, it looks like it's hurting some people, but it's not like population control, then one side says, oh, I can't believe you're simping for big pharma, and then the other side says, oh, this is very safe and effective. So I know it's a little bit of a tangent, but I don't know, any thoughts on that before we start rolling?
Well, I think that really speaks to what we deal with in the 9/11 truth movement is that there's an absence of nuance. People tend to get really, really hard line, and they go very, very far in either direction. And it's like an ideological thing, I suppose, is maybe how you could look at it. It's almost religious, where people will disregard things out of sort of a almost dogmatic type attitude. And so like pieces of information, which really honestly should be all just assessed, pieces of information get abandoned by either side, really. If you're talking about like a hardline debunker or like a hardline truther, they're going to really pick and choose what they want to assemble as a sort of a theory. And it's that lack of nuance that I see constantly. I'm sure Adam sees it. You probably see it yourself, Kyle. You just alluded to this issue. People get really, really dug in on certain things, and they're blinded by it because they're going to disregard information. And I think it leads to people being incomplete. That's the 9/11 Commission. It's incomplete. So that's why I'm thrilled to talk about some of this stuff, especially these new releases and this new information that it is getting reported on, but pretty sparsely. And so I'm thrilled that somebody wants to talk about this stuff.
So before I throw it over to Adam, I saw you guys like diving in on a few people because I feel like there's just this instant cynicism with some government narratives, and completely reasonably so. I'm not saying these people aren't justified in being very cynical about government narratives, but like sometimes people just default to the contrarian position without giving any thought, and then they'll boil in whatever conspiracy they like to that narrative, so that way they can kind of push out the information that they want to see, rather than saying, okay, well, this is, what the truth is, and this is like my speculation, and we can kind of go from there, rather than I hate to say Tim Pool already, but Tim Pool is one of these people who will omit all the information that goes against Trump, but then he'll put all the good information out there. Like he says, oh, I love his foreign policy. Oh, no drone strikes, none of this. I'm like, you cannot say that. And then you can't claim to be a non-biased actor, because you're giving people information under the pretense that it's not biased, but you're omitting a huge amount of information that would that would make the person that you like look bad. And just that shit drives me absolutely nuts. If you would just come out and say, hey, I take full-blown concussions from Trump's penis all the time, okay, fine, you're off the hook. But he won't do that. So I'm going to call it out. So yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, well, I mean, a great example of this would be, I was at a Twitter space yesterday that Sean was at when they were talking about 9/11. It was actually a big space. It was like 250 people there. Probably the biggest 9/11 Twitter space I've ever been on. Mm-hmm. And was headed by somebody named Philip Kircher, who had Andy Steele, who's the spokesman for Architects and Engineers, who also hosts a radio show called 9/11 Freefall. And I just happened to come into the space. I didn't even know it was on. And somebody actually said, I think it was Nelson that gave me Nelson Martin's DJ Thermal Detonator, gave me the link to the space. So I said, all right, might as well, what's on here? And I raised my hand because somebody was talking about the Pentagon, I think, was something, what happened at the Pentagon. It was questionable. And that's the main dividing line of the 9/11 truth movement, whether a plane crashed or not. And I got to speak. And for a while, they let me speak and stuff. And the guy kept having me on and kept saying, I like your position and stuff like that. But you had other people who basically were propagating the same old theories that have been around for, since 2003. And I was, solidifying the fact that here you have evidence of eyewitnesses, physical evidence, analytical and technical evidence of the plane taking off Dulles and whatnot. And you had people that would not hear it. One woman near the end basically said no plane hit the first tower at all. And then when I tried to talk with her, she was adamant. No, I all the videos are manipulating stuff. And she left, basically. So like Sean said, I think what the problem with the 9/11 truth movement and just in general is that you had there's so much awash of disinformation online. And at the other hand, the good information that you talk about, Sean, is actually underreported by, of course, the legacy media. And this actually helps the state, because the state doesn't want an educated public about what happened on 9/11. Go ahead, talk about no hijackers, talk about no planes, talk about holograms, because you know what? It all leads down to a dead end, and you don't get that investigation that you desperately want. Mm-hmm. And so I was a bit surprised that a bunch of truthers actually wanted me to speak at for such a long time. It was like 2 hours. I think I was there for like 2 hours, 20 minutes. I was pretty surprised. It lasted till about 2 a.m. But I hope that maybe in the future, younger people like Sean and Darren and, the kids at Project for New American Century, they can basically reach the big audience that I could, and then basically build a new truth movement where we can actually hold people accountable for 9/11. I still have hope for that. So, and I think what I'm seeing is a turn, actually.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so my understanding of, and this is going to sound so like basic, but like, so 9/11 started with, basically response to our foreign policy. And there were supposedly a lot of other hijacking events that were supposed to be going on. Right. And now obviously a lot of this information is, hey, there were no planes that hit anything, the videos are altered. What were these documents that were published, and what does this kind of add to the 9/11 story as you guys understand it?
Adam, you want me to give a little introduction to sort of what we're talking about here today?
Yeah, sure. Well, the documents are the Canestraro documents from the Office of Military Commissions. A little bit about Donald Canestraro. He's actually a former Drug Enforcement Administration officer, a special agent, actually, for over 20 years. He got involved with the Office of Military Commissions. And in April of 2016, started investigating Saudi Arabian links, financial and analytical and logistical support to two members of Al Qaeda who later became part of the 9/11 attacks. When he started investigating these Saudi links, he found out that there was a couple of Saudi officials that were basically involved with these two hijackers, two known Al Qaeda operatives, and they were inside the United States. At the same time, the CIA, who was basically running a dual covert operation with the Saudi government, were conducting these operations without the knowledge of the State Department or the FBI, for that matter, which would make this an illegal operation of sorts. We've known this for a while, myself, Sean, and others, but we just didn't have the direct information, the direct evidence to suggest this. When this document came out 2 weeks ago, I remember being in a complete state of shock. It solidified all my suspicions that, yes, I think that there was a foreign and domestic intelligence services that were operating out west, much less the East Coast, which we're waiting on information for that. But now we know for sure that through this document, which Canestraro basically interviewed ex-FBI, ex-CIA, and even former 9/11 congressional officials, with most of them talking on conditions of anonymity, basically coming out and saying, yes, there was an illegal operation involving the CIA and Saudi Arabian government in monitoring of two hijackers in the hopes of having Al-Qaeda informants to basically give them intelligence. So, for example, the document states that Omar al-Bayoumi, basically, who is a Saudi official working for the Saudi government, was friendly with these two men. Now, he was interviewed by the FBI in 2003 and basically gave a conflicting testimony that he gave to the 9/11 Commission. And basically that he said that he walked into the restaurant and saw these two men, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. But according to his associate, Qassem bin Dan, and later to the FBI, he basically said, no, that wasn't the case. He was in the restaurant first, and then Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi came in. But whatever story you want to believe, he basically says that he helped them get an apartment because he felt sorry for them, that they were in this country, didn't speak much English, and he wanted to help them get an apartment. But later on, when the FBI actually interviewed him, agents from this operation called Operation Encore, he basically told them, they basically told members of this mosque that he belonged to, the King Fahd Mosque in Los Angeles. The FBI said, has he ever done this to anybody else before? And they all said no. He was very frugal with his money. Interestingly enough, at the same time, where was he getting paid from? He was getting paid from a front company called Dalla Efco. But he was also an employee over 23 years for this company called the Office of Air Arabian Presidency, or something like Saudi Arabian Air Presidency. And his salary was about maybe $500. But when Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi came into the country, it suddenly became $3,500. So we can safely assert that the funding was coming from Omar al-Bayoumi through this company. At the same time, there was an associate of Omar al-Bayoumi named Osama Basnan. Basnan was actually a militant who actually had pictures of Osama bin Laden in his house and actually threw a party back in 1990 for a known Egyptian militant called Omar Abdel Rahman, which the FBI knew about. So this guy had long-standing links to terrorism and he knew terrorist individuals. He was getting money from his wife, and his wife is Mawida Dawijak. And this money was actually coming from a woman named Haifa bin Faisal. Now, you're probably saying, well, who's Haifa bin Faisal? Well, she's the wife of the former U.S. Saudi ambassador to the United States, Bandar bin Sultan, who's nicknamed Bandar Bush because he's close friends of the Bush family. And their account was through Riggs Bank, which has very nefarious links to individuals involved with countries that propagate terrorism, especially Saudi Arabia.
Okay, so
That's
basic,
a lot.
yeah. Okay, so tell me what I'm missing here, because I want to try to summarize what I got from what you just said. So basically, this document confirms that that there were Saudis who were essentially meeting with congressional officials who had pretty close ties to the Bush family. And specifically around the time of 9/11, their salary increased through a shell company. Do I kind of got like a real loose box around that?
Yeah. So you had Saudi officials working on behalf of the Saudi government who was working in pair with the CIA. Mm-hmm. And you also had a former official who is known to the Bush family, who was given money through 2 intermediaries, going directly to somebody who's known to Khalid al-Mihdhar and Awaf al-Hazmi in the hopes of separating this money. Now, you can't, in regards to that, you can't say that Bandar bin Sultan is basically giving money to 2 terrorists. Even though that money went to terrorists, he can basically distance himself and say, I gave it to Mawida, I gave it to my wife, who gave it to another woman for medical procedures, because that was that's the reason for the money that was given by Mawida Dawija. But on the other hand, you basically have an illegal operation involving the CIA, because by law, the CIA is not allowed to conduct operations inside the United States without full approval of the State Department. But this was not, or the National Security Council. So you had the CIA operation involving the Saudis monitoring these 2 men, using Saudi officials, monitoring these 2 Al-Qaeda operatives who later became part of the 9/11 attacks. The only thing we can't pinpoint is whether they knew the attacks were going to happen beforehand. We don't know that yet.
So you don't have motivation, essentially.
No, but we do have illegal operations happening with the CIA. This is actually very damaging to Saudi Arabian government and the CIA. Incredibly damaging.
So it's basically like, you know that the fire's there, but you just can't find the lighter. Would that be an appropriate kind of analogy?
I would like that. Yes, very much.
Okay. Yeah.
No smoking gun yet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of funny because by the time this airs, the reason why I tweeted out, pay attention to the Libertarian Institute tomorrow, because my article with Steve Bannon, Miles Guo, and Li Meng Yan will be airing tomorrow. They're actually gonna have that as their lead article tomorrow, and it's the first article I ever wrote. So I'm pretty proud about it. So thank you. So the reason why I bring that up is because Steve Bannon was given, I think, like multi-million dollars, and one loan in particular was given to Steve Bannon from Miles Guo for quote unquote strategic consulting fees. So, and you could assume, what that's for, because obviously he's bankrolling Bannon, who, in my estimation, is compromised on being hawkish on China, because his financier is, a CCP dissident who wants regime change in China, because he's defaulted on a bunch of loans to different CCP billionaires. So, that's a completely separate and irrelevant tangent. But Sean, anything you kind of got to add to anything that I said or that Adam kind of covered there?
Yeah. Adam went into deep water really quick there. What I want to do is give just a little bit of a backdrop that we can sort of hang that on, and then we can compare it to sort of a background image of what we're talking about with 9/11 Truth and 9/11 investigation. This month, the big news is the declaration of Donald C. Canestraro. So it's 22 pages of information. It's hundreds of line items of data. Some of it is like effectively redacted, and that you can't read names for all of these people. You can deduce who he's talking about, but it's a lot of information in a very tight package. So something that I'm already saying is the 22 pages is more important than the 28 pages. And that was what I wanted to get at here, to sort of frame this topic, because it exists within a larger discussion about files being released, trickled over time after, the 2010s or so. So, I mean, what I can say out the gate is, like, this is the biggest news in maybe a decade.
All right, guys. I'm absolutely thrilled with the show's new sponsor. I am now sponsored and have an affiliate through LMNT electrolytes. I have used these electrolytes for years. Back when I used to do a lot of fasting, in fact, I used to drink sometimes I want to say up to 7 a day, 7 little packets. So the packets are full of all the electrolytes that you need to perform and hydrate yourself properly. You need sodium for pretty much every single function in your body, despite what a lot of people may tell you. Sodium doesn't actually cause a lot of the issues that people kind of would have you believe. So just real quick to give you a little bit of facts. You don't need sugar to hydrate. Electrolytes in water don't require glucose to pass through the gut. The average American consumes over 60 pounds of sugar a year. And when it comes to athletic performance, you can actually lose up to 7 grams per day in hot climate. So make sure you click on the affiliate link below to get all your hydration needs. And like I said, I'm super stoked to have these guys teamed up with the podcast, and just make sure you get your electrolytes through LMNT. All right, guys, thanks.
But it doesn't mean very much if you don't understand the backdrop here. So I wanted to just talk a little bit how we got here. So over the last year and a half or so, we've been seeing a lot more information finally released under the Biden administration of all things. But we're seeing a lot more information released, and it's allowing us to fill in the gaps. So like what was alluded to earlier is like we sort of had a theory about what was really going on with the 9/11 operation and with the cover up afterward, but we were missing some details. So we sort of had to construct a loose framework about what we think this looks like. Now we're getting more of those details and we can plug those in. So what's been going on ever since the Obama administration is we've been working off of the 28 pages. Now, some 9/11 investigators, reporters, and researchers were already pretty sure that like, hey, there's something going on with Saudi Arabia. It's even kind of obvious to the common person when they just look at the national background of the 9/11 hijackers, even just according to the official narrative, right? The official story. And so the 28 pages released during the Obama administration was what was missing from the Joint House inquiry into the intelligence activities preceding 9/11. Basically, what did the intelligence services know leading up to this event? And then you can use that to sort of compare with what happened, what did everyone say after the fact, like with the 9/11 Commission, and how that all stacks up. So the 28 pages basically says, hey, we need to be looking at state funding. So like if we're talking about state terrorism, well, I mean, obviously Iraq got blamed for 9/11 and we all saw what happened over there in the Middle East, but in actuality, what you're actually dealing with is most likely Saudi Arabia. Well, they're an ally. Well, the 28 pages gave us that hint. Some people were already hip to it. Like I'm pretty sure John Gold and others, they were already sure, hey, we're looking at Saudi state sponsorship at least. Well, ever since then, there was a long gap where we didn't have that much new information released. Now we were working with the information that we had, and we were sort of trying to stack together what this all means. But about a year and a half ago or so, we started to get information from Operation Encore. So previously we were working off the Pent Bomb investigation, which is really important just to look at, hey, what did the original investigators discover? What did they think? What did FBI think? What did CIA say or not say about all of this? And so what we now know is the information from Operation Encore, the follow-up to the Pent Bomb investigation. And that's given us even more information about what we were already basically assuming after we saw the 28 pages, which was apparently pretty mind-blowing in its day. Before it was released to the public, this was information that was withheld from the joint inquiry. And it was only known to certain members of Congress who were able to like basically go into a private room by themselves with no notes or cameras or phones, and they could look at that information, but they couldn't talk about it. And I believe that there was at the time a sentiment expressed by someone about how they couldn't speak about the information that was contained in those 28 pages, but it drastically changed the way they viewed United States foreign relations in the Middle East. And different 9/11 people interpreted that in different ways. But with the most recent information over the last year and a half or so, it's like well beyond that. And all the details are coming out. There's thousands of pages of the Operation Encore files that I haven't read them. I think even Adam is like a machine over there trying to read through them all. He probably hasn't got through them all either. But we're uncovering pretty incredible stuff. And so what's happened just this month is the Declaration of Canestraro, which it's a bombshell. Basically, today, like what we can say today is, if the 9/11 Truth Movement was looking for an inside job, here it is.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the inside job. It's right there. But what I wanted to finish up on this point with, just to give you a little bit of a broader picture of 9/11 Truth and this whole topic, this all hinges on a couple of figures who we'll get into, and there's actually figures surrounding them, which we'll get into as well. But this all hinges on two individuals called Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. They were the burliest of the muscle hijackers that took control of Flight 77 on 9/11 and hit the Pentagon, which incidentally would have been like, you know, the bigger act of war regarding that day. You could probably spin a pretext even if they didn't hit a military installation. I know Reagan hit Libya for less back in the 80s, but it's like, that's your act of war, right? Well, these guys, we had been assuming for years, were some kind of intelligence assets because of their histories, because of their connections. And what we're looking at now with the declaration of Donald C. Canestraro is more data about a cover-up, more data about obstruction, more data about how people were lying, even under oath. Like we were already pretty much presuming that some of the people that were interviewed for the commissions and for the inquiries, that they were lying. Well, now it's like other people, even reputable figures whose names aren't included, but you can somewhat deduce who these people are. People in FBI, people in CIA are saying, oh yeah, there's deception involved in this. So we've got like basically a proven cover-up, basically a proven crime on the part of the intelligence services regarding their handling, especially Mihdhar and Hazmi. And the final point here is that those are topics of discussion which the 9/11 Truth Movement for 20 years have avoided like the plague, because the biggest topic of discussion in 9/11 Truth has always been no plane hit the Pentagon, and how there was something suspicious with the airplanes, and how the hijackers didn't exist, or how they were still alive or didn't take part. It's the link that leads you to the intelligence services. So the point here, again, to reiterate, is if the 9/11 Truth Movement was looking for an inside job, well, it's right here. But if you don't believe that there's hijackers or hijacked airplanes, if you believe that a missile hit the Pentagon, none of that matters if you're trying to argue that, say, law. You can't make a strong argument for any of that. And all of that goes out the window, which Adam talks about that all the time. He's like a broken record, he says himself. So I hope that gives a little bit of a backdrop to what this newest information is taking part of, if that makes any sense at all, I hope.
Okay, so kind of what I got from that was basically, what were the hijackers on Flight 77's names again? I just don't.
Well, we're talking about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. Those are bin Laden's handpicked, seasoned Al-Qaeda veterans. They fought in the Balkans. They're like, you know, bad dudes.
Okay. So
they were known terrorists, by the way.
And they were the hijackers on the flight that hit the Pentagon, correct?
There were 2 out of 5, or the number is disputed, actually, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's so funny because, like, in my mind, you would think, and I'm sure you guys probably battle this mental thing all the time. It's like, this is like red meat for the truth movement right here, because everybody agrees that the intelligence services are bad, right? And from what I understand of everything I've heard you guys talk about, like, this is such a big topic. Like, to me, it was almost simpler to just say, like, oh, well, 9/11 was just, disastrous foreign policy mistakes. People got pissed off and then hit the Twin Towers. But, like, the more I learn, the more I realize I know nothing. And that's usually a fascinating thing, but like it still is. But, like, at the same time, it's just like, holy shit. But it seems like it was a perfect storm of egos and the intelligence agencies kind of button heads that caused either malfeasance or complacency in 9/11 happening. So from what I understand as well, and I think you guys have covered this, is that the intelligence agencies knew about these guys and there was lots of documentation of them, and they knew that something was going to happen. And then when something happened, then they were like, oh, well, I guess we have to go invade Iraq and set the Middle East on fire. And these documents that were just leaked are, as you guys kind of said, a little bit more of a link in this chain that's building the full thing.
Yeah. Adam, speak a little to that. You can go a lot of different directions with it, but pick that up, Adam.
Could you repeat that question again?
So basically, like with the two people on Flight 77, these documents had kind of tied them a little bit closer between the intelligence agencies and the Saudi Arabian government, correct?
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Okay.
I would even go so further as you can tie at least two domestic agencies in suppressing information, and the one agency hardly anyone talks about is the NSA. The NSA is the one agency that has the most information regarding all of the hijackers and their associates, because they had two monitoring operations that were working simultaneously one another. One was a phone tap of bin Laden's satellite phone. It's disputed when this started. According to some CIA officials, it started in '92. But what we do know is that they knew of a number in '96 that was tracked to an Al-Qaeda communications hub in Yemen. And this is actually a house that was resided by one of the hijackers, Khalid al-Mihdhar. And the NSA began monitoring that number as well. So they had two open lines. But bin Laden got rid of the satellite phone in '98 after the embassy bombings. And what happened was this phone line in Yemen became the most surveilled house in the world, because the NSA told the CIA about it and the FBI, because the NSA doesn't do human intelligence. They only do signals intelligence. So they were listening to phone calls, but the CIA put a bug inside the house, and they only listened to the phone calls that were outgoing. And they asked the NSA, whether, can we get the other half of the transcript? They said no. So basically, they were monitoring this house 5 years before 9/11, and they knew that there was a person named Khalid who was living at this house, because he was married to the daughter of the owner of the house. And basically, this information was kept from the FBI and the State Department all the way until after 9/11. I mean, it was just stunning, because the CIA knew these two guys, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf Bahavni, had links to Chechnya, as Sean said. They were served the Chechen War. In fact, their military commander was Ibn Khattab, and Ibn Khattab is an associate of bin Laden for many years.
Can I stop? Could I ask you a question here? So, the FBI had information, or I'm sorry, the CIA or the FBI, whichever intelligence agency. I'm just
CIA and NSA.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the NSA had all the information on these two individuals, but they purposefully kept it from the other one.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that's okay.
Let me add to that. The only reason why the CIA knew is because they had a CIA analyst working with the NSA regarding the monitoring system. So they basically, the CIA basically knew, but the NSA told them about these two individuals, because in the hopes of gaining photographs to the faces that they were listening to.
And they had all this information prior to 9/11, correct?
Yeah. Oh yeah. 5 years.
Okay. So I guess real quick, let's put a little pin here. Sean, go ahead. What do you think the motivation was? And then Adam, I'm curious your thoughts on that as well. For them not sharing the information.
For withholding information. I'm going to be conservative, and I'm going to say that the intelligence services are very proud, um, and they think that they're in control because they probably are. For a large part, they probably are in control of the things that they're doing. And I'm gonna just give everybody the benefit of the doubt that they thought that they had everything under control and that this Frankenstein's monster was all under wraps and it was going to be okay because what they're saying is that, well, what they want is a mole in Al Qaeda before 9/11. They want to have somebody on the inside, and I don't doubt that. Why wouldn't they? And so basically having a, hey, hands off of these basically red flagged terrorists in Midar and Hazmi, who are like, they have links to the USS Cole bombing in Yemen, like known terrorists who are basically hands off characters, that if what they want to do is flip these guys, okay, they thought they had the Frankenstein's monster under control. And maybe they could have gotten to that type of attitude over years because they'd been dealing with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan for a decade back in the 70s and 80s. So maybe they thought it was okay. I think it's way worse than that, but to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, probably it's at least okay to suggest that the intelligence services thought they knew what they were doing. But there's an implication with that too. Did they know what they were doing, and what were they doing? That's a whole other topic.
Right. So basically the question would be, did they know what they were doing in terms of, we know we're withholding this information and this is our end goal? Or did they say, hey, we know what we're doing, this is under control, don't worry about it? That's kind of the question that you're asking.
Well, a lot of stuff was just ready to go as soon as they had the pretext. So that's why it gets a little disturbing, and there's a lot to say about that.
Sure. Okay, Adam, so what's your thoughts on their motivation? And I made sure I put a note here because I know you were kind of outlining the link between the intelligence and then the documents. So what do you think the motivation was for withholding information? Do you kind of agree with Sean's analysis, or, like I said, just curious your thoughts?
I'm going to be a coward and follow Sean's link here, but I'm going to be a little bit daring as well. So yeah, I think the general safe position here is that yes, because in 1999, Cofer Black, who was actually given the head of the counterterrorism center by George Tenet tasked him to get more involved with infiltrating Al Qaeda because they had no inside moles or inside information regarding this very mysterious, nefarious organization that was operating in Afghanistan. So what happened was that for years, the CIA and NSA were obtaining as much information as possible, with the NSA being the gold standard regarding actual information about what was talking about on those phones. They knew about these two guys that were in a Malaysia summit meeting of Al Qaeda operatives, high level meeting that was known to the NSA because they heard about it on the phone in December of '99. They told the CIA, they told the FBI about it, which is the only time where the NSA actually shared information. So the CIA told the Malaysian authorities, take pictures of this meeting, take pictures of the people coming in and out, and they did. And it was given to the CIA at the Counterterrorism Center and this analytical station called Bin Laden Issue Station, which is codenamed Alex Station, named after the son of the chief of statement, Michael Scheuer. And this information was a photograph of Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, and someone by the name of Khalad, who was the name used on the phone. And his name is actually Tawfiq bin Atash, and he's the alleged mastermind of the Cole bombing. So here you have a bunch of people and other, high-level Al-Qaeda. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was at this meeting, Ramzi bin al-Shib, Fahad al-Quso, and later on Zacharias Musawi, who is the alleged 20th hijacker. And there's a lot more. Ridwan Samudin, who actually goes by the name Degor Hambali from the group Jemaah Islamiyah in Indonesia. there's a lot of high-level terrorists at this meeting, and the CIA and the NSA and Malaysian authorities knew about it, so did the FBI. But where the disassociation comes is that they were coming to the United States, Khalid Abidar to Wapahazmi, and the CIA took photographs of their passports because when they were in the hotel room, one story is they were staying at a hotel in Bangkok. They left Malaysia to go to Bangkok. And they left their room, and the CIA broke in and took pictures of the passports. But they had U.S. visas, dual U.S. visas. And this was shared to the Counterterrorism Center and the Bin Laden Issue Station. The disconnect is this was not shared with the FBI. FBI was working in this analytical station, saw the draft, saw the information, ran to the computer. Doug Miller, who was an FBI working at the Bin Laden Issue Station, FBI agent, and basically was drafting and saying, as soon as they come to the United States, the FBI has to monitor them right away because they knew about these guys' pasts and knew what they were involved with. CIA, under the deputy chief of station, Tom Wilshire, basically told his analyst, Michelle Ann Casey, to basically say on the draft, please hold off sending this information. So for days, this information wasn't sent. In fact, another FBI agent, who I've interviewed, Mark Rossini, basically went to complain and said, why isn't this information being shared? They're coming to the United States. It's FBI jurisdiction. And Michelle Ann Casey told him, it's not an FBI matter. We think the next attack is in Southeast Asia. If we want the FBI to know, we'll let them know. Meanwhile, Mark Rossini is telling him they're coming to the United States. This is an FBI matter. It's not a CIA matter. What does this all mean? The CIA withheld this information in the hopes of, because of the illegal operation that was happening inside the United States involving the Saudi government, to obtain as much information as possible from these two men in the hopes of maybe one day having them work on behalf of the Saudi government, which is basically the Saudi government and CIA, and then collect as much information on Al-Qaeda as they can. But the thing was, as Sean pointed out, was that they trusted the Frankenstein monster. Now, what's missing? That is where I'm going to be a little bit daring. Specifics. Did they know about the plane's operation? Well, I would say right now that's unproven. But if you're going to blame any agency about specifics, blame it on the NSA. Blame it on the Israeli intelligence services who are operating under the guise of art student rings and under the guise of the moving front companies throughout the the Southwest and Northeast, because that's who are monitoring the members of the Hamburg cell, which is the other side of the plane's operation, those guys that were basically hijacking the planes and piloting them. Khalid Al-Mihdhar and Wapahazmi were selected as pilots, but they basically couldn't speak English. They failed the English classes, and they were replaced by Hani Handra later on. But the CIA and the FBI and the CIA and the Saudis were out west, the Israelis in the east. So who would know about this operation, the planes operation? Because somehow it had to be talked about. Well, the NSA would. Because if they were talking about that on the phones, and we don't know what was said on the phones because that information is classified.
And the NSA is the only one who has it, right?
Right. Now, the Israelis themselves were living close by to the Hamburg cell, the pilot hijackers. They would know. The muscle hijackers were not told at this point. That's what I'm saying. Muscle hijackers came later, but they weren't told about the operation until days before, or like a week before the attacks. Some of them knew, but most of them didn't. But the pilot hijackers would know because that's what they were selected for. And who was following them? The Israelis. So you have the Saudis, the Israelis, the NSA, and the CIA. I'll keep on the side for now because we can't prove that they knew about specifics. But if I want to be daring, I would say those intelligence services would know because they were listening to the phone calls and they were living right nearby the pilot hijackers who would know about the operation firsthand. And the CIA, I can't say that they knew, so I'll go with Sean on that one. I would say that they, if anyone knew, it would probably be either George Tenet or the director of operations, James Pavitt, or even Cofer Black, the counterterrorism director. But I would say that very, very few people knew about the specifics at all.
Okay, so now one thing that kind of came up for me right there, a lot of people want to point to Israel and a certain demographic of people and say this is all them because this kind of fits their narrative, which is understandable because that government does do a lot of bad things and then is very, very heavily intertwined with our own government. It kind of sounded like there's a tie between Israeli intelligence and the NSA because the dancing Israelis and then the moving companies over on the East Coast. So suffice it to say, was there significant connection between the NSA and Israel?
That's a leap.
Okay.
There was no direct evidence showing that the NSA and the Israeli intelligence services were working on the pre-intelligence operation of 9/11. There's no evidence to suggest that the Israelis were working with anybody in the American government at all. Could that have been secret? Yeah, sure. The Israelis themselves could be running a separate operation which coincided with the intelligence services, but there is no direct evidence to show that they were working directly under any domestic service in the United States.
But you could, and once again, I'm not saying that there's evidence for this, but through the dancing Israelis and then the different moving companies, couldn't that kind of suggest a motive, or am I off base here? If I'm wrong, then please correct me.
No, motive itself was to collect intelligence about what was going to happen. Now, how would they know that unless they had a mole inside Al Qaeda, which I speculate that involves Ziad Jarrah, right?
Okay.
His family's involved with Israeli intelligence, but I can't prove it.
Sure.
Because Ziad Jarrah is allegedly dead, right? And we don't have anybody that can confirm that Ziad Jarrah was actually an Israeli mole, other than the phone calls made from Flight 93 that said there were only 3 hijackers and not 4, as stated by the FBI and the federal government. But that's all speculation, right? But if you wanted a mole inside Al Qaeda, the Israelis may have had that. And if that's being related to the Israeli intelligence services, well, that's the reason why they were running those separate operations, to make sure that this operation is successful, because it actually benefits Israel when the United States gets involved. It destroyed, the preconceived enemies of Israel. Now we're talking about foreign policy guidelines and that predate 9/11 and which benefits each government. But like I said, there's no direct evidence for any of this. So.
Okay, yeah. The thing that kind of comes to mind is just, once again, Israel would want domination over the Middle East, and it benefits them for the U.S. to be at war with Iraq. So, obviously, the motivation between seeing, once again, the moving trucks and the dancing Israelis, and then the overall outcome being beneficial to Israel. In my mind, that kind of forms a full circle. But as you said, there's no evidence to necessarily put a nice bow tie on that. Sean, do you have anything to add, or and Adam, if I'm off base, then correct me.
Well, that's a great question. It's tough to answer it because, as Adam points out, the information isn't there.
Yeah.
So what we can show is that the Americans and the Saudis were working in some form of coordination. There isn't anything in the files that suggests that there's that kind of case with the Americans and the Israelis. There's just nothing.
Okay.
So take from that what you will. The entire absence of it. Maybe there's something to the fact that there is nothing. Maybe there's something to that, but you can't say for certain. But talking about foreign policy and all that stuff, that's relevant. All of that. It's a bit of a can of worms.
Yeah. Okay. So now what were some of like the most egregious violations that you guys were kind of seeing? Because I know, Adam, you made a video on Mindy Robinson. Sean, I see you grinning. So maybe I should throw it off to you first. What were like some of the most ridiculous takes that you've seen on this? Because I know I have some followers that I said just want to point the finger right at Israel right away and say that, that they're entirely responsible for this. But yeah, I think that was part of what Mindy had said. So, Sean, I guess go ahead first, and then Adam, you can kind of tag on anything else you might have seen.
Well, as we've already basically said here today, 9/11 is a huge topic, and it spiderwebs out in many directions. Regarding what we're seeing this month, it mostly pertains to Flight 77 the Pentagon attack, to a degree, Southeast Asia, and to a degree as well, the attack in Yemen on the USS Cole, and it pertains to Saudi intelligence services, and also there's a factor sort of nested in with the Saudi intelligence services, which is the religious aspect. They're almost intertwined. It's a really interesting thing to sort out. We probably won't be able to come to a great revelation on that today, but what you're dealing with when you're talking about Saudi Arabia is like it's two or three things at once, because you've got a monarchy, it's theocratic, and you've also got spooks, the intelligence services, and the GID. So there's like these factors which are intertwined. But if you're going to try to bring something like the Israelis into it, well, with Midar and Hazmi and the operations on the West Coast, like it's not really there. And with the Israelis, it's all on the East Coast. And I mean, if you're talking about funding out east, then you're bringing it back to KSM again, because KSM's nephew was sending money, or he actually had a couple of nephews. One of them bombed the World Trade Center in 1993, and another one, Ammar al-Baluchi, I think his name is, sent money to 9/11 hijackers. And so that's East Coast stuff. That's the moving companies, like you point out. There's a lot that I can say about the moving companies, but none of that's in the Canestraro Declaration. It's all pertaining to really what's going on out west. But there's so many glaring, like disturbing things. That's why I keep saying this 22 pages. This is bigger than the 28 pages. It's stacked. There's like 100 disturbing line items in this file. Something that I could just throw out real quick, though, is related to that Malaysia summit. That the CIA and NSA were observing this high-level Al-Qaeda meeting in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, I think, where they're watching, they're listening, and we don't know all the details about what was said, but we know who was there. A lot of them who was there. And that's in early 2000, is it, Adam? This
January
meeting? So something that's kind of interesting to take into consideration, because this is all like going through the 28 pages, going through Operation Encore, and this month, Declaration of Donald C. Canestraro. I believe it's in the Encore files. There's a December 99 phone call from Malaysia to Fahad al-Tumeri at the King Fahd Mosque about two brothers. I think that's probably in the Islamic sense, not in the paternal sense. Two brothers who will be arriving in the United States. That's before this high-level meeting. And I believe that's from an FBI confidential source. But the reason that this little nugget stood out to me was, well, December 1999, that's the Millennium Plot. That's when there was going to be a great big attack. It fell through because the Millennium Bomber, Ahmed Rassam, was apprehended. But that could have been a September 11th at Y2K, basically, if anybody's old and they remember that. Dumeri had phone contacts with Ahmed Rassam. But he's supposed to be associated with armed Islamic group in Algeria. So there's this weird thing about December 1999, Dumeri phone call from Malaysia. The Millennium Bomber's got his phone number, and Ahmed Rassam intended to cross into the United States from Canada in December 1999 and bomb LAX airport as part of the Millennium transnational terror plot, which would have been enacted during the year 2000 Millennium celebrations. And that's very curious, because Rassam trained at an Al-Qaeda camp, but he's not a Bin Laden guy. Bin Laden didn't handpick him to do it. And so that opens up a whole nother web of things. So I think we got on this topic because of Israelis, but somehow I'm talking about Canadians. So anyway, those are my thoughts on that. There's so much more. I've got a list of things that we could kick around. I'm sure Adam's got some things he wants to kick around as well.
Yeah, real quick before Adam goes, that's absolutely fascinating because I've never heard anybody really talk about the Y2K stuff. I just remember seeing like an episode of Family Guy where they were joking like the world's ending, or no, it might have been Futurama where all the computers are going to shut off because they're not able to process all the zeros or something like that. But I didn't.
And bombs.
But that was
around the world.
Yeah, that's fascinating because that does all, like you said, open up a whole new window of possibilities, especially when there seemed to be foreknowledge of two people coming to make an attack, way prior to 9/11, but there was also, kind of something being kicked around about attacks on Y2K in particular at the LA airport. So
just think about how the Christian evangelicals here in the United States would have responded to that. Oh, we would have been whipped up into a great big frenzy.
Yeah. So sorry, Adam.
Unfortunately, when you get right-wing zealots like Mindy Robinson and others talking about, this latest, remarkable information Canestraro has uncovered, you have preconceived biases and want to blame certain people or certain governments in certain countries because that fits your worldview. And that's not my main concern, and something that I try to rectify to my viewership is that you have to look at any event in history with a clean slate. You can't allow your preconceived biases to get in the way of information that may be contradictory to those worldviews, because then you're not an investigator, you're actually a hobbyist, right? So Mindy Robinson actually the other day posted a tweet about blaming Israel for 9/11, and somehow this information was revealing that the federal government knew about the attacks, and so did Israelis. None of that's in the Canestraro document that she probably has not read. She probably glanced at it, and not to mention she's the girlfriend of a guy that I actually really like, and it's the former UFC light heavyweight champion Randy Couture. And I'm like, oh, great, I really like Randy Couture, but I feel bad because here's this woman who's basically got a decent sized following, and she's posting disinformation regarding the most revealing document that I've ever come across. And not only that, she's not alone. You got people like, I hate to say it, but Jason Burmas is another one. He did a video on the Canestraro document and basically was talking about it. Now, the thing about Jason Burmas is that there's a lot of things that he said that were actually correct and right. And but here's somebody who basically believes that the planes were actually swapped for drones, and just crashed in the World Trade Center, Pentagon, Shanksville. In fact, the drones were outfitted with missiles. And I'm like, why would you need a missile? The plane's a missile at this point, going 500 miles an hour, filled with 40,000 gallons of fuel. You don't need a missile, just it'll explode into the tower, But when you mix, my point being is that when you have these people that basically want to give attention to a great revelation involving 9/11, and then you want to propagate these irrational, very incendiary theories, you're basically doing a disservice to the public, right? Because the public is basically not going to read the document because people really don't read anymore generally. It's unfortunate. And it's 22 pages only, but it's very condensed, packed full of information that you have to, make sure that the information's right. Who is this and what's this? And basically what they'll do is they'll go by these people and just say, oh, yeah, it talks about Israel. It talks about, swap theories of planes. And it talks about none of this. So that's why I'm very anal, and people think I'm being very aggressive and rude, but that's the opposite. What I'm trying to do is basically provide information without any type of influential biases behind it. Just give you straight facts, and that's it. But when you have people with bigger channels than me, much bigger, and they're, doing such a disservice, not just to me, I don't care. I know better. But when you have a public that don't know any better about 9/11 or just comes across information, they're going to believe these people because they, hey, listen, I follow this person because I generally think this person's a, reputable source of information, when they basically might be in certain respects, but in other respects, they're not.
I am stoked to tell you guys about the show's new sponsor. I am now working with MTS Nutrition, which is a brand that I've believed in for a very long time, and they run awesome cells and they have awesome products. So I want to tell you about their amazing protein powder, which you're going to ask me how many pounds I have of the protein powder, and the answer is all of them. So here I got Red Velvet Cake, 25 grams of protein, and they have the amino acids and everything on there, 59 servings. Peanut butter fluff, fluffernutter, 26 grams of protein, and then also the chocolate chip cookie, which literally has real pieces of chocolate chip cookie in there. So 27 grams of protein, 180 calories. As I've talked about on the show, getting your protein in is very, very important, so make sure you hit that link below and purchase your protein powder through MTS Nutrition. Boom!
When it comes to 9/11, it's unfortunate that it's saturated with these fringe theories that basically hurt really big information. I think Sean brought it up earlier. You have a conspiracy at your disposal. You don't need these fringe theories to give it a bigger conspiracy. The irony is that, these fringe theorists of the truth movement, talk about this conspiracy involving government and, the intelligence services. Meanwhile, they're covering up a much bigger conspiracy than they could even imagine by hiding or blanketing the actual facts and the information with fringe theories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing that I've always just lost my shit over was when people say a certain treatment is population control and they start pointing to excess death over the last couple of years, and they just look at that. I'm like, well, then you have now forgiven all the lockdowns and everything that happened over the last 3 years, because now you're ignoring all that and just pointing to this. And like, I would hold these fuckers to account for what they did in 2020 and 2021, and telling all these people that they can't go to work and what that does to people. And I mean, I was going through paper after paper, going through websites to find statistics on unemployment deaths over the course of 6 years, and then, missed cancer screenings and all this kind of stuff. But when you just say, oh, the treatment is population control, then once again, now all that shit goes out the window, because now you just have a ridiculous theory that you want to push. And yeah, it gets clicks, and yeah, everybody looks and agrees with you. But, it's like you're pissing up a rope while I'm trying to climb up that rope. I can't do anything here. My hands are fucking sliding because you won't stop, tarring the fucking baby. You've made it now a mess that now anybody who disagrees now looks like an idiot, thanks to all these people who just want to get clicks and want to get attention. It's kind of what I think I replied to a thread that both you guys were on, calling Mindy Robinson. At one point, she was just a thirst trap for MAGA people, and now she's a libertarian engagement broker. And this is essentially what people do. They'll have like just plain takes that don't give you anything and just get your attention and clicks. You get a like and a retweet and then move on, but you don't get anything out of it. But though people like us who want to provide good information, and yeah, sometimes I throw out ridiculous shit there just to talk shit, but like, it's so funny. If I go after somebody, thousands of views. But if I give you a thorough breakdown of information or try to provide you something that's going to help you, then nobody looks, nobody cares. So it kind of goes to what you guys were saying about Jason Burmis. If you say, oh, look, no planes there, or a missile hit the Pentagon, then people are like, oh my God, really? And then now, they're going to go to his channel and they're going to give him all the super chats. But though the people who are saying like, hey, this is the breakdown of this document, this is the information without any hyperbole, then people are just like, okay, whatever, where's my, I want to go see somebody fucking a donkey or something. Like, I don't care about this boring, dry shit. It's just awful. I can't stand, this too long didn't read generation.
Idiocracy. My balls.
Yeah, it's my problem. My problem is I'm very dry. One person actually called me years ago the Robert Smith of 9/11 because I'm so depressing and just just downtrodden, right? But I'm only providing information, evidence that people could use, and that's the only thing that matters to me. If I speculate, I'll say it. I'm speculating. Jason Burmis actually said in that video that, if I say I'm speculating, I usually say it. But then in the same video, he's speculating, but doesn't say he's speculating. So, yeah, it hurts. But the good thing, I criticize his points, but the good thing is he's talking about it. And this might bring attention to, the public saying, well, what's this document about? So that's the plus side of this. So.
Yeah.
But can he simplify it?
Yeah, there's that saying, and I think it's actually pretty useful, that if you can't break it down in a simple way, then you probably don't know it well enough. And that's completely butchering the quote, but yeah, like if I couldn't explain to you something on your car, then that's a fault on me, because as a dude who's been fixing cars for 10 years, that I should be able to boil this shit down basically and simply enough that anybody can easily understand it and digest it. And that's kind of also the other problem that I think sometimes we may have on our side, is that I see people do this where they just go information overload. And I don't necessarily think we do this, but like there will be people who just dump studies and sources on top of people. And it's like, well, they're not going to fucking read that anyways. So like you need to find a way to give them the steak and sizzle, but you got to find that happy medium of steak and sizzle, not all sizzle, no steak, or all steak, no sizzle.
My problem is that I'm guilty of this sometimes. Like I'll just talk about a specific point about 9/11 and just go, completely an hour into it and then lose people. I'm guilty of this, but now I've learned to basically condense that point. And I don't do hour-long videos anymore. I do maybe 7-minute videos with visuals and whatnot, even though I still use Movie Maker. Yes, I'm old. But yeah, no, I try to condense a certain, but 9/11 is so expansive. It's so complex, but you don't need to look at it that way. I mean, I do, but you can get a general sense of what took place before 9/11. You don't have to know what happened after 9/11. You know what happened. You're living it. But before 9/11 is the history that is, as Sean said before, incomplete, and has been saturated by fringe theories that basically blanket the cover up involved with the intelligence services and the federal government and foreign governments as well.
Yeah. So, Sean, was there anything else there in those documents? I know you mentioned a phone call about two brothers. Was there anything else in there that you found particularly interesting? And then, Adam, I'm curious your thoughts as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Give Adam the chance, and I'm sure he'll let it rip. It's stacked. I mean, like the Canestraro documents also further confirms that Tumeri had been lying. I believe the quote that's included in the file is that Altameri was less than 100% forthcoming during his questioning at the commission. Here's one that's a bomb for you. Philip Zelikow limited the number of witnesses to the commission, specifically pertaining to the Saudis. So like that's in the commission days. So talk about an incomplete picture. When the guy in charge of the whole commission is going to limit information, now that's really egregious and weird. And I'd love to hear people try to explain that away, because that's just shameful. Can we say that it's criminal? It's horrible. There's also Bayoumi was under investigation by FBI even before the 9/11 attacks, and Zelikow fired a commission staff member for trying to obtain an index of the joint inquiry report. So there's all these weird things that we never probably would have guessed. I don't think we would have even imagined these weird situations that are now in the Donald C. Canestraro Declaration. And I mean, I guess it's worse than I thought, basically.
Yeah.
Seeing this newest information, it's worse than I thought. There's so much stuff. Here's more stuff from the Canestraro report. Osama bin Laden station member was blocked by order of the deputy head of the Alex station, Tom Wilshire, from sending a Central Intelligence report outlining the possible presence of al-Midar and al-Hazmi in the United States. Wilshire was at the time working with the FBI on the USS Cole investigation, which would pertain to Midar and to a degree Hazmi. The same station member blocked by Wilshire would also be told by CIA officials at UBL station not to cooperate fully with the congressional investigations. And consider also when Mark Rossini of FBI was interviewed by Inspector General, CIA officials were present, making sure Rossini didn't say the wrong things. The UBL station member would also recall, this is nuts, would also recall overhearing CIA Director George Tenet. Would overhear, I have it written down here. The staff member would overhear CIA Director of Operations, James Pavitt, telling CIA Chief George Tenet that he was glad they kept Michelle Ann Casey hidden from the commission officials, and that Tenet agreed that this was a good idea. The staffer stated that this indicated that the two CIA officials had conspired to obstruct the 9/11 commission. I'm flabbergasted.
Yeah, it's just like the more and more I learn, the more and more it just looks like there was so much ego and malfeasance at play, where there were literally people obstructing each other from every single freaking direction at every single opportunity. I mean, it's so fascinating to think that the events of one day just go off in millions of directions. I mean, like it's hard for me to fathom all this. And I told Adam, and I think you might have caught a little bit of the tail end of this, like all day today and yesterday, I've been listening to like you guys talk about this stuff, and it's just like, oh, there's so much there. So anyways, Sean went on there for a little bit. Adam, your thoughts and anything that you really took away from the Canestraro documents?
Yeah, in fact, I'm glad Sean brought up the after effects of the attacks, because there was another point of contention in the Canestraro files that comes from a confidential source, CS8, where he basically talks about the CIA being tasked to the counterterrorism center in San Diego. And basically, this CIA liaison officer was actually spying on the FBI to see what they knew about al-Hazmi and al-Midar and the links to the Saudi government, because remember, al-Hazmi and al-Midar actually landed at LAX, but then moved to San Diego, where they were met by Omar al-Bayoumi and Fahad al-Damari. Omar al-Bayoumi and Anwar al-Awlaki, who's an imam at a mosque that they attended. Fahad al-Damari and Osama Basnam were in Los Angeles, and then they got them to move to San Diego, which basically was set up by Omar al-Bayoumi's payments and stuff like that. CIA wanted to know what the FBI knew at that point, because the FBI was conducting the investigation, which was called Pent Bomb, that Sean brought up before. And through their investigation, San Diego, other than New York, was the major hub for the FBI regarding intelligence because of the two hijackers that were living there. So the CIA was basically spying on the FBI in their investigation and relaying that information to the counterterrorism center in Langley. And this is actually unbeknownst to the FBI, because they thought that the CIA was working with them, not against them. But as Sean brought up, this was not new, because in the year 2001, the one man who told the FBI told the CIA analysts not for the FBI to share that information about al-Midar and al-Hazmi in the country, Tom Wilshire, went to work as a liaison with the FBI in their investigation of the Cole bombing. And what was he doing there? Well, basically, fishing. He wanted to know what the FBI knew, not about the Cole bombing, but basically about Midar and al-Hazmi's connections to Khalad, because if they can make that connection, this is no longer an intelligence matter for the FBI. It's now a criminal matter where they can get involved and arrest al-Midar and al-Hazmi for their connection to the Cole bombing. But because that information was not shared with the FBI intentionally, might I add, this becomes, as you said, Kyle, malfeasance, and as Sean said, maybe even criminal. I'd like to know if there's a statute of limitations actually regarding it, but there probably is. But again, the CIA continues to this day actually to say that we never withheld information. They're still lying about it to this day.
So, Adam, I think you've mentioned filing FOIA requests to get some of the information. And the NSA would kind of be, and once again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but like if you were to get information from the NSA, that could kind of put a bow on a lot of this because they're the only ones that would have the metadata that could kind of explain some of the communications that were going on through some of the people that were here and some of their communications, let's say with the Saudis or different terrorists, right?
Yeah, I a couple of years ago, I proposed an idea, and the idea was, how is it that everybody's filing FOIA requests regarding information about the hijackers and planes and whatnot, but what about the NSA? And what were they listening to these phone calls? I always said that, we could make or break the case right here for 9/11, because if I proposed a question to Thomas Drake, the former senior executive of the NSA, on Twitter. I said, Tom, is it possible that we could file a FOIA regarding the phone calls that were listened to by the NSA? And basically the NSA, heard every single phone call. If we go back to 92, but just say from 96 to 2001, that's 5 years of all the phone calls made in that Yemen hub and a communications hub worldwide for Al-Qaeda. And not to mention Bin Laden's satellite phones at the same time. I said, is it possible? And he said, it would be, and I'll try to do the best to quote. He said to me, I would be assured that it would probably be protected under a certain executive order, but all of that is classified because the trials haven't started, right? In Guantanamo, we're still waiting. He also told me that that it's a pipe dream, but you could try. He goes, nobody's ever done it before. And I said, yeah, that's right. Nobody's ever tried before. And I don't know, I'm not too experienced. I did it once regarding the flight manifest of Flight 23, the fifth plane to TMZ talked about now. A couple of years ago, I tried to get the flight, but I'm not law enforcement. So they told me, no, I'm not allowed to get it because I'm a public servant. So basically, what I'd like to do is maybe get somebody who's really experienced with FOIA requests, like a Jason Leopold, right? And basically talk to him about filing a FOIA request regarding what the NSA heard. And according to Thomas Drake, and this is from him, Thomas Drake basically said that the NSA had so much metadata, emails, phone calls regarding those lines, that if it was shared, they could have stopped 9/11 altogether. They had all the flight information regarding the hijackers, what times the planes were going to take off, all the tickets, information, phone calls made by Bin Laden, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, Mohammed Atta, God knows who else. All this information they had. And the NSA basically said that their excuse is that they didn't transcribe all the data through their program Trailblazer in time to stop the attacks. Well, regarding the analysts for the NSA working those lines, they didn't hear the phone calls, or maybe they didn't speak Arabic or whatnot. I don't know, right? But let's just say that they were talking about the attacks on the on those phone calls, and that could have been stopped. Well, we could hold the NSA accountable. Hey, we knew about the attacks, but we don't know it because we don't know what was said on those phones. What if Al Qaeda wasn't talking about the attacks at all, and that they weren't behind it? That's a stretch, because we do know that they were behind it because they. Ramzi Youssef and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, before they were tortured, actually gave a confession video interview to an Al Jazeera reporter, Yosri Fuda, before they were captured, right? So at least we do know that they were, partly involved with 9/11. But, we can actually surmise who was involved, who wasn't involved, and what time the attacks were known and whatnot, and why didn't they stop it? Why didn't they share it? And that's what I like to file a FOIA request for that. But I know it's a pipe dream, because I know that information is classified, and we'll never know, because we'll know. That's why.
Right. So I guess I'll throw this over to Sean, and then Adam, you can tag on after that. What would you have any hesitation in saying that the NSA is then directly guilty for allowing 9/11 to happen, or would you be hesitant to say that because, let's say, maybe it was like just the bureaucracy of the NSA that would make them not, or that would make it so that they would miss this crucial information? Because as Adam just said, they had enough information to stop 9/11, but maybe we could grant them the benefit of the doubt and say that, you know, they just didn't listen to it, they didn't process it. In my mind, it sounds like these fuckers are guilty. They let this happen. But then, you know, there's also the less cynical part that could just be, once again, they had a lot going on, and maybe the individual at the time didn't, you know, put two and two together. What are your thoughts there, Sean?
I think it's a heavy charge.
Mm-hmm.
That's a heavy charge.
Yes.
I would be very hesitant to assert that.
Mm-hmm.
If it came to the point where someone was going to make that accusation and they had to defend themselves, I think it'd be pretty easy for them to simply say we were overloaded. We had all this information and nobody to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be very easy to sort of skirt around it. And I think without knowing exactly the information and being able to formulate a case around that,
Mm-hmm.
was really deep into speculation territory about
Sure.
whether we could make that hit a target and we would make that stick on anything. They could just say, "Oh yeah, it was analysis paralysis. We didn't know what to do because it was all this stuff, and plus none of us speak Arabic." And you know, it's like they could probably skirt around it.
Mm-hmm.
So I probably wouldn't make that charge, but I would like to know the information, and I would like to know who had the information. Because just like with Tenet effectively perjuring himself at the joint inquiry, talking about how nobody read the cable when the cable was read, you could maybe then work with that if you knew who had the information, what was the information. But without knowing what they have, I don't know. I can't make a case around it. So I'd be very hesitant to make that charge. But it wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me. After seeing all this, how creepy it all looks now, with some of these details falling into place, looks downright disturbing.
So basically, I don't want to speak for you, but it kind of seems like these documents kind of, I don't want to say put the nail in the coffin, but they kind of rest the tip of the nail on the wood that's not driven in.
Somebody's going to have to give somebody else up.
Right. Okay.
I think this is where you can really hold some fire to somebody's feet. You could make somebody crack and maybe give somebody else up, and that's where foreign relations comes in.
Okay.
Because like we talk about East Coast, West Coast, you know, there's a whole coast of the United States with intelligence services going on that Canestraro document doesn't even touch. If there's a document like the Canestraro document regarding the Pakistanis or the Israelis or something like that, like, oh, now we're talking. Mm-hmm. But so somebody might crack on this because they basically fell on the sword like Tenet, you know, still tried to kind of lie and get away with it. Tenet lied like 2 or 3 times under oath. Mm-hmm. Like you could now, that's the end. That's like the crack in the armor.
The camel's nose under the tent.
You could wedge that. You could get somebody to give somebody else up, maybe make something of it. It's really exciting.
All right. So then, Adam, the NSA being downright guilty, do you kind of agree with Sean's analysis, and do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no. You would be well met to reserve that charge until better evidence comes out, because at this point, like Sean said, they can basically just fall in ignorance and just say, yeah, we didn't read the information until afterwards, because that's what they actually said. In fact, Bill Binney gave a talk many years ago, and I forgot what conference this was. It was actually a big conference, and he was invited. And he said that one of the analysts working at the NSA regarding the phone lines basically didn't read the information until much later, until after 9/11, where it was condensed. And Thomas Drake actually took that information to Signals director, manager at the time, Maureen Baginski, and he gave her the information regarding, you know, what they collected at the Yemen hub. And she said to him, "Tom, I wish you hadn't shown me this, because by saying this, now she can't feign, you know, plausible deniability. They knew the information." But now here's the thing. Did they know it at the time, or did they know it afterwards? That's the only thing missing. So I like Sean says, I can't blame them.
Okay. All right. So basically, yeah. So you couldn't get an indictment. You could basically say, hey, there's a lot of evidence. Well, I shouldn't even say a lot of evidence, but like, this is my case, but you wouldn't levy a charge because, like you said, basically the timing of the information isn't there.
Right. And remember this, the NSA is the agency that was barely investigated, even in the 2 congressional investigations. In fact, it was barely, I have both uploaded on my YouTube. And you could see it for yourself. They barely asked the director, Michael Hayden, a question.
Okay. So real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
I'm curious both you guys' thoughts on this then. If the NSA was the least investigated, do you think that's on purpose, or do you think that's just because, some other reason? Maybe they were worried about the FBI or the CIA, or, just kind of, I don't want to say a moral panic, but a panic about terrorism. What are your guys' thoughts? Do you think that was on purpose or no?
Oh, it was on purpose. In fact, even Thomas Drake said that the CIA was, Sean Brett brought this up before, that the CIA was willing to, fall on the sword, so to speak. In the book, Michael Hayden, his memoirs, I forgot his book that he wrote. He talked about when they were talking about the cable that came in, and Tenet says nobody read that cable. Well, in Hayden's book, basically, he says that Tenet goes down for his briefcase and says, I'm not going to give her up. And meaning that the analyst who read that cable was Michelle Ann Casey, and she was the one who read the cable. And later on, in Against All Enemies, which was written by Richard Clarke, the head of the National Security Council, he basically says, the Counterterrorism Center, he basically says that over 50 agents read that cable. So 50 agents for the CIA read that cable and withheld that information from not just the State Department, the FBI, but also from Richard Clarke, the leader of the head of the NSC. And so there was this coordinated effort by the NSA and the CIA to withhold information, and as well as the 9/11 congressional inquiries to not basically touch on this, because it's, as Sean said, it's a matter of national security and foreign policy, which are, the essence of 9/11, why it happened.
Sean?
It's interesting that you bring up why it happened and foreign policy. That just makes me think back to something regarding 9/11 truth and conspiracy theories. Nobody in the truth movement is understanding this conversation right now. If they're watching, they're not looking at this Canestraro information. And it's because they have this, for whatever reason, what they've effectively arrived at, the conspiracy theorists, is that Al-Qaeda has no agency, Arabs don't have agency, there is no terror apparatus, there's only security services, and they fake everything. And it removes, interesting enough, it removes the motivation for something like this to happen on the Middle Eastern side of things. It's pretty clear why somebody like a bin Laden, somebody like a Ramzi Youssef or his uncle KSM, why a terrorist would have done something like that in the first place. Because, hey, don't get confused by the headlines. Look, they're not agents. Well, they might be assets. Don't get confused by the sensationalist headlines. The terrorists have agency, and they do what they do for a reason, and it's the foreign policy. It's because of the United States' dealings in foreign affairs in the Middle East, particularly with offending a religious attitude by basically staging a launch point of a military aggression in the Holy Land, and an unwavering support for Israel. And so by removing figures like Al-Hazmi and Al-Midar, not even understanding why something like that could have been concocted and mechanized in the first place, that's almost the biggest cover up of all.
What's up, everybody? We're going to take a quick break and tell you about the show's sponsors. We are brought to you by LMNT electrolytes. I've been using this stuff for years, and what I've honestly found is that if I didn't have electrolytes before some kind of cardio, and sometimes even before workouts, that my workout performance, or definitely cardio performance, would suffer greatly. Sodium is responsible for every single movement pretty much in your entire body, and let's say you drink a lot of caffeine, like I like to do, then maybe it is a good idea, like I do every single morning, put some LMNT chocolate electrolytes there in your coffee to get a little bit more sodium, potassium, and magnesium in your coffee, so that way whatever diuretic effect you get from the caffeine is pretty much diluted by the fact that you put chocolate salt in it. Also, it tastes really, really good. Get some chocolate cream or hazelnut cream or even coconut, and mix that all up. It tastes really, really good. So yeah, make sure you drop by, go to drinklmnt.com/inlibertyandhealth and pick you up some electrolytes today. All right, guys, thanks.
Is that nobody understands why Al Qaeda would do that. Now, CIA probably understands why. They love handling assets. So, with these new Canestraro documents and everything grim coming through on the American side, I mean, I was more on putting blame on the Middle East until I see some of these line items, and now I'm like, oh man. In a way, the conspiracy theorists were sort of right for the wrong reasons when they said inside job, because now it's looking really grim on the Americans. There's so much. Kyle, you got to read the files. It will blow your mind. Hundreds of items. We can't even go through them all today. Hundreds of items.
Yeah, I gotcha. Well, you know what? I want to talk to you guys a little bit about music, and then we'll call her quits. So, real quick, do you guys have anything you kind of want to add to anything we discussed today, or do you just want to move on to just shooting the shit about music for a few minutes?
I had something I wanted to ask Adam.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
so looking at this new information, and like, again, this is like stacked on top of what we've seen with the Encore files and stuff, right? So this is like years in the making. We're looking at this, and we always thought it looked pretty bad on like CIA and NSA. And we always kind of have been given FBI a pass. I wanted to ask you, Adam, if your opinion about FBI's part in this has changed somewhat after reviewing this new information.
it has a little bit, and you're not the first person to ask me that. Actually, Peter Lance once asked me that too, and that was a phone call a year prior because I was supposed to interview him regarding the book 1,000 Years for Revenge. And he basically says that, have all the years that you've been at this, what has changed your mind? Because he's big critic of the FBI, huge. He's the biggest critic of the FBI regarding pre-9/11. And I said, yes, because by reading your books and now with this Canestraro document coming out, my thing was that I've been protective of the FBI up until this point. Now, there's FBI whistleblowers, right? Before 9/11. But after 9/11 is when the FBI conducted the cover-up of the Saudi government. And so I can no longer say now, with these latest revelations, that the FBI was actually the innocent agency that I once previously thought. After 9/11, they're just as guilty as the CIA for helping to cover up regarding any Saudi financing logistical support to the hijackers themselves, which would make them culpable of the malfeasance and other criminal activities that they were involved in regarding cover. Now, not to say that the entire FBI is involved. Certain FBI agents like Danny Gonzalez, who led the charge at Operation Encore, very few agents were involved with that, not as opposed to the pen bomb investigation, which is the largest FBI investigation of all time in their agency's history. But very few people wanted to do a follow-up to what was revealed in pen bomb, for the exception of a few out of New York and San Diego, which was led by Danny Gonzalez. And good on him, because what they uncovered through Operation Encore was basically what was reiterated, but more in the Canestraro documents. And basically it all confirmed that the FBI after 9/11 helped to cover up on behalf, of course, pressure from the Bush White House and Obama White House as well, in regards to Saudi links to directly involving with Khalid Ahmed. So yes, Sean, my opinion has changed about them.
It's grim, right?
I think that's an understatement. And people know me as a pessimist, and I'm thinking the worst. But in this regard, this is a horror show.
All right. So I guess, yeah, like I said, you guys have anything else you kind of want to add to that? Because I got one question then. Like I said, I don't think Adam and I have ever talked music. I know, Sean, you play as well. So you said any final thoughts?
No, I think my only parting thoughts here would be it's only 22 pages, but it's very condensed, as Sean said. So be prepared for an overwhelming amount of information at your disposal. You can always reach out to us, Sean and myself, as well as Nelson and Darren and the kids, Ben and Eric at Project New American. We'll try to do the best to assist you. We're very open. Unlike in previous past where, skeptics were very closed to the public. We're much more open to the public because we want people to know about this information. But please look at it without any, rose-colored glasses. Just look at it as information, and wherever it leads to, it leads to. And if you want to blame Israel, you want to blame Muslims, or you want to blame just CIA, well, you're only going to look at information that agrees with that worldview. So please look at it with, a very unbiased lens.
Sean?
I think Adam hit it pretty succinctly. I'd concur with all of that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So one more question before we move on from there. In an ideal world, in your going out on speculation, would you say the U.S. government is guilty or not guilty? And once again, this is just speculation from what you know. Adam, you could go first.
Guilty of
doing 9/11, essentially.
Would you? No, not at all. There's no evidence to suggest that they orchestrated or planned 9/11. I've always agreed with Michael Collins Piper, a controversial author, but I agree with this, that the Arabs facilitated, planned the plot, but that the intelligence services, foreign and domestic, got wind of the plot before it happened and manipulated. That's exactly what I think happened.
That from what I've heard, everything that I've heard, that seems to me like the most logical explanation, at least in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I know there's a lot of people in the truth movement that like to blame the CIA or the Israelis for 9/11. But no, I don't think they orchestrated or planned it. I do think that they knew about it and they manipulated it in order to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Sean?
I'm never the person that says inside job. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's an inside job.
Right.
Hey, I'm open to all the information. And there's some information floating around out there that can really, can twist your arm about certain things, which are some deep waters to wade in. Basically a blanket kind of explanation or statement like the government is guilty is too vague. It could be misconstrued in a lot of ways. Basically, when we make sort of broad conceptualizations like that, maybe you get a lot of people that agree with you because they in their own mind have some kind of interpretation of what you just said, but it means slightly different things to everybody. So I'm not an inside job guy. And I've even said in the past, if you're going to make a safe bet, what you have is they let it happen on purpose. You have the lie hop is the safe bet, not made it happen on purpose. That's not as strong of a case. What I could say is it really does look like somebody fumbled something. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost a perfect storm, as you pointed out earlier, where like there was a lot of key points that things went awry. That's where again, we're in speculation land. That's where you could sort of wonder, like, was that like pinpoint accuracy, like for how things fell through these cracks? Like if somebody knows the system, they're going to know the cracks, and you could maybe pachinko machine that thing down through the system, and because it'll fall here, it'll fall here, it'll fall here. We have plausible deniability here, plausible deniability here. We can get away with it, like right if somebody was a grand orchestrator.
Yeah.
But as I sort of alluded to earlier, what that does though is it does sort of rob a terrorist of their agency, and it's just not concrete as far as the facts that are available, and it's very grandiose. It's a really big conspiracy, and there's plenty of big conspiracies that are out there. Some of them are outright science fiction. So I wouldn't make the charge, the literal charge of the government is guilty. I wouldn't make that charge. But what we could say, and like maybe like sort of tiptoeing close to an extreme position, is they failed for whatever reason. Maybe it doesn't even necessarily have to be on purpose. It could have been accidental or incidental. There's failure, and then cover their ass after the fact. And crisis capitalists take advantage of their own accord of the situation to sort of work with it and accomplish something, because people are motivated in government. They're always trying to accomplish their goals. And so it's like there was failure. Nobody got spanked for it. People got promoted for their failures. Nobody got spanked for their failures. And what we can see now with the Canestraro information is they were covering it up. So what you could make a charge about is, all right, well, you guys were covering your ass. At least maybe somebody should get slapped for failing as hard as they did and then never taking any form of accountability, and basically just skirting the issue and creating a boogeyman in Iraq to give everybody something to get riled up about. Everybody breaks out their flags, and nobody thinks about, oh, well, did we just fail catastrophically? No time for failure. We're going to go win something now. Get with it. So it's my abstract answer to a sort of a loaded question.
Oh, no, that's all right. So you could almost say negligent homicide that was covered up.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean,
that's even a little bit
because
of
it's a bad situation that nobody took any accountability for it, and at the end of the day, we put inappropriate blame on a state actor that had nothing to do with it. In fact, it's something that Adam brings up all the time. It was the aftermath of 9/11 that was far worse,
right?
Far worse than the day of.
Yeah,
a lot of conversations to have about all of that.
Yeah, and I know in this hour and a half, which like I swear I blinked and it's gone. It feels like we just kind of scratched the surface, but we'll definitely have to do it again. But before we click off of here, I know Adam's answer to being a fan of heavy music. Sean, where do you put yourself in like the music category? Because I know you have a guitar in your profile picture.
A lot of people will tell you, "Oh, I listen to everything." They're liars. I literally do listen to everything. Lately, I've been listening to 1990s hip hop, and
that was not what I was expecting.
I listen to classical stuff. I like traditional pieces done in classical arrangements. I like punk rock. That's like my favorite is, and it's kind of a guilty pleasure, but I love punk rock. I like heavy music, sure. When it comes to heavy music, I like. I'm really particular. I guess I like old school thrash. Basically, if I'm going to listen to heavy music, I'm kind of a crabby old bastard, and I mostly just listen to old Slayer records and like Motorhead. I like shoot, man. I like weird music from around the world that's arranged in like intervals that sound completely gonzo to the American ear. I like all sorts of stuff. I like stuff that makes me think. I guess that's something that I could point out is something that's gonna make my brain activated. So I'm interested in like weird shit like freestyle jazz and things like that. I've become more interested in electronic music in more recent years. I guess I was sort of a supremacist or traditionalist or something for a lot of my life, and I only liked live instrumentation. But I've been listening more to electronic instrumentation these days. And then once in a while, I'll listen to pop music too, just because I hate myself.
That was I cannot say at all that was the answer I was expecting. That was way out of left field compared to what I had in mind. But I'm in this group chat for libertarians that like heavy metal, and I tell people this story about how amazing my wife is, because we bought our tickets to go see Metallica and Pantera out in New Jersey. And like, this was as soon as Pantera announced that they were running through the United States. I'm like, oh my God, that's my favorite band. So obviously their guitar player, Dime, was killed on stage in 2004. So I would have been 10 years old at the time. So I never got to see Pantera. Now, Zach Wilde is my number 2 guitar player, Dimebag Darrell being number 1. So like, this is a huge deal for me. And I love the rendition of Pantera that's going out. And, you know, people poo-poo it, but like, they're doing this for the love of, you know, Vinny and Daryl Abbott. So we bought our tickets. We got a hotel. We're going to drive to New Jersey, which is like 5 hours away from here. And then they announced that they're coming to Pittsburgh. So I was like, oh, well, we could just cancel our tickets for, you know, cancel the hotel, cancel our tickets for out there, and we'll just go see Pantera in Pittsburgh. My wife texted me back and she says, why don't we just go to both? I was like, all right. So Adam, are you going to go see Pantera and Metallica if they come through New York?
No. Can't do it.
Oh my God.
I'm old school. So the Dimebag is not there, and neither is what's it called? The lead singer, his name?
Phil.
Phil Anselmo. No, I can't do it.
It will be Phil and Rex, who are the original bass player. And Phil's not the original singer, but I mean, he was a singer for all the albums where they were bigger. Right. But Charlie Benanti from Anthrax on drums, and then Zach Wilde on guitar, which I didn't think Charlie from Anthrax would do Vinny justice, but all the videos I've seen, I was impressed.
Really? Who's playing for Metallica, by the way?
Who Metallica right now?
Yeah.
Trujillo's their bassist, and then, you know, obviously Lars, Kirk, and James. I've seen them twice over the last couple of years, and loved it every single time.
Really?
And their new album is actually really good, but I mean, my bar for good is pretty damn low, and much like Sean, I'm pretty much a fan of all kinds of music.
I'm actually going to a concert in June, but it's not Metallica Pantera. It's actually The Cure. So they're coming into the country, so I'd never seen The Cure, and I'm a big fan. So, but as for Metallica, once Cliff Burton died, that was it for me.
Purist, huh? I saw them in the '90s with Newstead on bass.
Oh, really?
It was great. It was great. Metallica's a great band. They're like,
yeah, they're a good lot. One of my favorite songs of all time is still "Fade to Black." So,
and I saw Pantera in the '90s as well, which I'm like really grateful for. Actually, I cried. Well, I may or may not have cried when I heard the news about Dimebag.
Yeah, no, when I was a teenager, I would cry every single anniversary because that was my favorite guitar player in the world. Why? But yeah, I'm super excited to go see them, and we also got our tickets for some like the Normie Rock, Breaking Benjamin, and all them. I would really like to go see Sepultura. I think they're coming back through Sepultura.
Sepultura, really?
Yeah. Even with Derek, I think their newer stuff, like their last 3 or 4 albums, have been absolutely fantastic. If you're into like,
I haven't kept up with them at all. Yeah, I forgot about Sepultura. I used to listen to them in the '90s. Yeah,
yeah, they're obviously all their '90s stuff and late '80s is really good. But like, once they got Derek Green in, like their first couple albums were pretty good, but like their newer stuff is more like death metal and groove, and I think it's phenomenal. But those first couple albums of them weren't quite as heavy as some of the stuff is now. Like it's a lot more thrashier, but like real low tuned guitars. And then Derek also sings a little bit on their most recent record, Quadra, I think it was called. But the one before that, Machine Messiah, was fucking fantastic too.
I've almost entirely forgotten about metal music, actually, because I mostly just listen to like Haunting the Chapel, and like I forget that there's other bands out there. But I guess I've always been a Metallica fan, though. So of course I listened to the new album, and whenever Metallica is in the news, I'm reading the article. I'm listening.
I forget what they put out their longest song ever on their newest record.
Yeah, it's the end track. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's got a weird name.
It was
in a
Insomnia.
Maratha,
Yeah, I don't know, but
something like that.
I listened to it. My wife and I were coming home from going to dinner, and it came on. We listened to it like right before we got home, and I'm like, wow, that was actually like really good. And then the one song that always sticks out in my mind off their second to most recent record was a Spit Out the Bone, which was like just gnarly.
That's another album finisher. Yeah. I rather liked that double album. I thought it had a little bit of filler in it, but it had some great moments.
They've been doing it for 40 years. These two most recent albums I think are pretty good. Death Magnetic was and then they had Lulu,
it just needed better engineering. Like it's mixed all whack.
Right. Yeah, like
cool songwriting, but it's hard to listen to because of the fidelity issues. It's mixed all whack.
Adam's not into it. Sorry.
I'm old fashioned, so like Sean, if I listen to metal, it's all like from the 80s, 90s period.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, Adam, all right. So Metallica released an album after Injustice for All. I just wanted to let you know, and then they continued to release albums, and there have been several of them.
I have not known any of them. After Injustice for All, I thought that was the end, really, for Metallica. I wasn't a fan of Black and other albums that came out after that. I haven't been really paying much attention. I think actually a new form of music that I've been paying attention to is something I don't think that you're into. Neither one, I'll dare say it. Shoegaze, I guess.
I understand it exists. I don't think I've heard.
Yeah.
More
melancholy and more slower and much more. See, I'm also quite expansive in music taste, but like old forms of music that I don't like the new forms are hip hop and metal.
Oh man, killing me. I'm a fan of all metal. Like particularly what I grew up on was probably like 2002 to 2007 metal of like the stuff that kind of came after Pantera, Metallica. And not that I don't like Pantera, Metallica, and all them. Pantera's my number one favorite band, but like Killswitch Engage, Trivium, Lamb of God, God Forbid, Shadows Fall, those kind of bands, that was like what I grew up with and just always freaking loved, just because like the raw energy that was coming out around then, 2002 to 2007, was just unmatched for anything else at the time. And then sadly that a lot of those bands kind of went by the wayside, but some of them are still around, like a band that I really like now, and you guys will probably hate me for saying this, but Bad Wolves. The reason why I love them so much is because all the guys that were originally in the band, and they changed singers for, kind of dumb reasons, but like all those guys in that band were playing in metalcore bands from the early 2000s, and they like never made it big. And then they finally formed Bad Wolves, and then they put out that cover of Zombie, which got beat to death, but everything else that they did was fantastic. They finally blew up, and it was just good to see guys who you knew just grinded their asses off for 20 years finally make it big. And you have all these assholes that say, oh, these guys are one-hit wonders, sellouts. Like, you guys have no idea the history. Like, all these guys played in bigger bands back in the early 2000s, but just like could hardly put food on the table, and now they're finally making it. You guys shit on them. Sorry.
They were a metalcore band?
Yeah, Bad Wolves, Zombie.
I didn't know that. Wow.
You never heard the cover of Zombie?
No, I've heard the cover. I didn't know that they'd been basically a metalcore band.
Well, no. All the members of that band were in metalcore bands in like 2002 to 2007. So like their drummer was from Devil Driver, the guitar player was from God Forbid, Tommy Vex was from Divine Heresy, Westfield Massacre in his own solo band. The one dude played for Bury Your Dead. But like these were all bands that everybody knew that liked metal and metalcore from the early 2000s, but they never blew up. And then Bad Wolves was, kind of members from all those bands that got together, and then they blew up. So it was like these guys got, in a positive way, what they deserved. They busted their ass and then finally kind of broke it big. But so kind of go back to the 80s and 90s stuff. I know Adam's a big fan of Death, and then like a Morbid Angel. I think Morbid Angel's coming through, and I never got the chance to see him. But one thing that always sticks with me, I played in this sludge metal band called Wretched Hive for a little bit, and I remember Where the Slime Lives came on in one of the bars that we were playing. All the people in my band were just like, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of like old bands, yeah, I'm a fan of Death. Another one concert I went to, Death was playing with Fear Factory, Obituary, and Slayer, and that was at the Ritz.
Solid.
Yeah, that's the best concert I ever went to. And I think Obituary came out with Chopped in Half in the album. They were unbelievable. It was so good. I think it was 1995. The year was. That was the best concert I went to. But yeah, I'm old school. I'm like Sean. I'm a grouch when it comes to newer music and stuff. But I heard a Lamb of God. At least I heard one band that you're into, and I heard they're very good. And because Slayer actually went on tour with them a couple of times. So yeah, I don't know the other bands though.
Yeah, I saw Slayer on their farewell tour, and that was pretty cool. And Lamb of God was in direct support. My first concert, maybe we can close on this. My first concert was Gwar, Lamb of God, Job for a Cowboy. And I was, I remember I was 15 years old, and it was at the Pittsburgh Station Square Amphitheater, which it makes me feel even older when I realize that place doesn't exist anymore. But I'll never forget the feeling of, and this is like a big it was like a parking lot almost with a fence and a stage. And I remember just walking in there and feeling it in my chest. And a short story, my band opened for Steel Panther back in 2020. And
awesome.
Yes. So the one thing I'll never forget is being on stage doing a sound check, and like it's one thing to be on the other side of the speakers feeling it in your chest, and then it's another thing to stand on stage and when your drummer hits his snare you feel it like that's just so. Yeah, I'll never forget my first concert, 15 years old, coming in and then seeing Gwar and their singer Odorous sticking a sword in this giant robotic creature's chest, and then babies falling out of it with a broken window and just ripping its arms off and shooting blood everywhere. Oh, I never forget it as long as I live. So Sean, what was your first concert?
That was Green Day on the Insomniac album tour.
Oh no shit! Yeah, I actually really liked that album. Year. Yeah,
it's their best album, Insomniac from Green Day.
Yeah, Adam.
Black Sabbath.
Oh my god.
1991. Black Sabbath. I wasn't supposed to go. Actually, a friend of mine who lived in Queens, Ridgewood, Queens at the time, actually had an extra ticket because someone of his group didn't come. And he called me because I played on the basketball team.
Wow.
Got lucky.
I'd say. Well, who else was with them? I know Pantera toured with them, but I don't think it was in 93.
No. Black Sabbath was touring with
was it Blue Oyster Cult?
I don't know the name of the band. It was a band I know I wasn't a fan of. And I didn't go I don't remember the name.
Shit.
No. Damn.
Well, yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to cut it off. So I guess we can go ahead and do plugs. Sean, where can everybody find you, brother?
Find me on Twitter mostly. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Odyssey. Really cool people can find me on VK. And I even use Facebook once in a while, but Facebook, everybody knows Facebook sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm out there.
Cool. Adam, where can everybody find you?
Yeah, you could just Google my name, Adam Fitzgerald 911. I come up. But if you go to my Twitter _ Fitzgerald, I on the pinned tweet, I have all the links on there, and you could take it to my WordPress, my podcast with Richard Cox, The Darkened Hour. I'm on YouTube. I have currently up to 3,500 videos there, and Medium. Actually, I haven't wrote an article in 4 months, but I have about 117 articles there, and it's all linked on my Twitter.
Nice. Well, I really enjoyed this chat, guys. Like I said, I know we scratched the surface of 9/11, and then obviously hit some music stuff at the very end. But we'll definitely have to do it again sometime. And if you guys don't got anything else, we'll close her out.
Sure. Oh, great. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Just before you leave, the name of the band was Exodus.
Oh yeah. Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Exodus. Yeah, I love Exodus. I can't believe you didn't like them. Wow. All right. Well, like I said, we'll do it again, guys. This was awesome. So yeah, until next time, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, pal.
Take care.